Hello everyone, welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about a parallax scrolling effect. Yesterday we kick-started a series on how to create different types of background parallax effect or in general parallax effect. So I'm going to put the description to that tutorial if you want to go ahead and check that out. But today we're going to step up the game a little bit and we're going to use JavaScript. Yesterday we only used CSS to create that semi parallax effect. It had its own limitations, but this one actually uses JavaScript. So as soon as I start scrolling down, you'll see that the image actually scrolls with a different speed. So you get this very cool sort of parallax effect, right? As you can see. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start the tutorial. Please go ahead and subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon to get the upcoming tutorials. Uh, so now I'm going to go to photos.com, front-end section, and using our famous online front-end editor. Here in the HTML, I'm going to create a main, and then within the main, I'm going to create 5 sections, right? Uh, I want to have the images on the first section, so I'm going to give this a class parallax, and also the third section. So I also will give it a parallax. For the other sections, we want to have a sort of a text. So I'm going to create a div, and then I already have some dummy text, which is lorem ipsum here. You can use any text that you want. So, and then I'm going to copy this div and paste it in the other sections that will contain the text, right? So in the CSS, I'm going to style this section. Let's give all the sections a height of 300 pixel and give them a border bottom of 1 pixel solid CCC so that we can see the borders. I'm going to go ahead and remove the margin from the body like that so we don't see that white border around the page. Now what I would like to do is style the sections that contain a div with text by setting the styles of div to have position relative, position absolute. So I'm centering this div. Top 50%, left 50%, and then transform, translate minus 50% on x-axis and minus 50% on top axis. So you can see that now it's centered, but it kind of put them all on top of each other. I need to make sure that the parent of this div, which is section, has its position set. So this is going to be position relative. So now you can see that the sections with the text are now having the text centered in them. Now for the sections that are going to contain the image, I'm going to use the CSS background image. So here I'm going to say parallax, and I know that it's the first child of its parent. Going back here, I'm going to copy the image URL. By the way, the images that I'm using in my tutorials are probably all copyrighted. I'm taking them from Google Images. Make sure that you don't use them in any product if you are not familiar on how to comply with their sort of copyrights, right? So for now, I'm just going to set background image and then URL, and I'm going to paste that. So now we can see that we have the first one over here as the background image. And also I'm going to copy the second one. And I know that the second parallax is going to be nth child 3. So the third one uh, in the children list of its parent, which is main. So first, second, and third. So now here I'm going to say background image and then URL, and I paste that. So now we have it over here. So now I'm going to add some style that applies to both of them. So with all the sections with class parallax, I'm going to give them background size to be covered. So now we see a little bit of a more of the area. So it tries to basically position or size the image or size the background image so that we can see most of the image um, in the section that it has its background on. And also I'm going to set the background position to be center from the x-axis and 0 from this. So basically the top of the background image is aligned with the top of the section, right? So now our markup is ready. Now I'm going to go ahead in the JavaScript and tell you what we're going to do to create this kind of sort of parallax effect, right? So if I come here, I'm going to JavaScript. First thing we need to do is create a reference to all the sections or all the elements that have the parallax as their classes, right? So now I'm going to say parallaxes equals to document query selector all dot parallax. And now the trick is we need to add an event to the window. So window add event listener. We want to listen to the scroll. And here I'm going to use ES6 syntax instead of ES5. Here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a constant scroll top, and I will gonna put the window dot scroll y value. So just to show you what this value is, which is basically the amount of scroll from the top of the page. So now if I go ahead and console log this value, let's say scroll top, I'm going to open the console in our online editor. We already have a console. So the moment I start scrolling, you'll see that this is going to be the value or the amount of scroll that we have in pixels, right? So basically, this amount that it sort of traveled is going to be 121 from the top of the page, right? So now that we have this, the next thing I want to do is that obviously we want to check if the top of the image or the top of the section with the image reaches half of the window, right? Half of the height of the window, then we want our scroll to happen or the sort of the parallax effect to happen. So one thing I need to do on this event listener, I need to loop over the parallaxes that we have. And so I'm going to do parallaxes dot for each. And then within the for each, I just make this parallax variable. And for each of those, I need to check something. And that thing is if. So I'm just going to move it, try to sort of align it by the half of the window. So top of this image by the half of the window. So now we want to make sure when the scroll amount passes this, right? So I'm going to say if scroll top, which is going to be up here. So I'm just going to move it back up here plus half of the height of the window. So I'm going to say plus window dot inner height divided by 2. So I'm just going to put it in its own parenthesis is more than the parallax dot offset top, basically the top of the section with the parallax. If this happens, then we want the effect to happen, right? So now what are we going to do? What we want to set is this background position style, right? So going back to the JavaScript, I'm just going to say background, well, basically parallax dot style dot background position. So right now I'm going to use sort of string literals in the ES6 syntax, so two apostrophes. And then within that, I'm just going to go ahead and put whatever we put here right now. So what happens is that if I start scrolling now, nothing happens, right? There is no parallax effect. Everything is the way it should. But now let's just put this scroll top value. So I'm just going to say scroll top. Obviously, it should be pixel. So now, if I start scrolling, see what happens. Boom. Now it's kind of fixed. It's kind of fixed over here. I'm not saying that this is the effect we want, but I'm just going to tell you what we need to set to change this sort of effect over here. Now the next thing we want to do is I'll try my best to sort of describe it so that you understand. So I'm going to create a variable and call it y position. Let's put it 0 for now. So I'm just going to change it to y position. So this is the actual value that we set in the CSS. So it's going to be 0. Now, what I want to really happen is that when it reaches here, I want to basically map the amount of scroll that we have in our page, which is going to be, from wherever the top of the window is until the end of the height of the image, right? Will be mapped to a smaller value. That's why you see this very small amount of parallax, right? Let me just code it so you can understand what I say. So now I need to define a variable that represents the minimum in my scenario. And minimum is going to be top of the image, right? Wherever it is. So I'm just going to call it const old mean. I'm just going to say old mean. Bear with me. I'm going to describe it a little bit more. So old mean, it's going to be the parallax dot offset top, right? So this is going to be my old mean. My old max will be old mean, whatever the parallax offset is, so wherever it is, plus the height of the image, right? So, or the section with the image. So this is going to be parallax dot offset height, right? So I have my old mean, I have my old max, right? But now there is a problem. The problem is that the first image here is already on top of the half of the window. So it's in the first half of the window. What I need to make sure that happens, my old mean, I'm going to check this. If, I'm going to use ternary operations here. So if parallax dot offset top is less than, right now you see that the offset top for this parallax one over here is less than window dot inner height divided by 2, right? So if this is the case, we want to make sure that the old mean is going to be the same value, which is this. Otherwise, I want to make sure that the old mean is parallax dot offset top minus window dot inner height divided by 2. So now let me tell you what happens here. So I need to convert the range that the scroll happens to a very small amount. And that is the amount that you can see that the parallax effect happens. So basically what am I going to do is I will define an old minimum, which is going to be the parallax top. But for the first image, you'll see that the parallax top is already on top of the window. But for the second image, we want to make sure that we uh, sort of subtract the window.inner height from it so that that would represent the old mean, because that's where we want our sort of range conversion to happen. So now what am I going to do? I'm going to create a function that converts the ranges. So I'm just going to say calculate range value, and this is going to have old mean, old max, new max, and the actual old value. And the old value is actually the scroll value. I'm going to tell you what happens here. So just bear with me right now. I'm going to say, well, basically what I want to do is pretty simple. I'm just going to put a comment here just to tell you what happens. So I want to value something like, from 230, let's say 230 is where the top of the screen is here, until, let's say, I don't know what the height of this image is. Let's say we set like 300, right? Um, so it's going to be 530, right? I want this range to be converted to 0 and let's say 50. right? Because if you notice when I scroll here, the amount of sort of background position that changes on the y-axis is really 0 to 50, right? So this is what I'm trying to do. Convert a big range, which the scroll amount is on that range, to a very smaller range, right? So what I need to do, I'm just going to create a constant old range. I'm going to say old max minus old min. And then I'm going to create a new range, which is going to be new max minus new min. Now, the new value, which I'm going to return here, is going to be the old value minus old min. So I'm just going to do like this. So that would be the difference of the amount from the start of the old value to the value that it's going to be at that given time. Multiply by new range, and then divided by old range, right? So this basically maps this sort of range to this range, right? And the next thing I want to do, I need to actually add the new min to this value. So now if I use this formula, so the old min is going to be, for example, 230. The new min is the old max will be 530. The new min is going to be 0, and the new max is going to be 50. Now old value will be something in between these two values. When we scroll down, our scroll amount will be somewhere within this area, right? And we want to map that value that actually is within the range of here and here to a very small range, which is 0 to 50, right? And this will happen using this formula, which is called an interpolation formula, right? So now if I use this, I'm going to say, instead of const y position 0, I'm going to copy it here. And now I'm going to call this function calculate range value. Our old mean, we already created it, old mean, and we have old max, and then it's going to be 0. And why it's 0? Because that's the starting value that we set on the CSS. So it's going to be 0, right? So that would be the starting value. And let's say minus 50, right? And now we have to pass our old value. And our old value is going to be this value, this scroll top or the scroll amount that we have. So I'm just going to paste it here, right? So let's go ahead and save this for now. Uh, I'm going to make it smaller. Now you will notice that the moment I start scrolling, we're gonna have that cool effect. See? There you go. Isn't that cool? So now the moment this one reaches the half of the window, it's gonna start the sort of scrolling effect, right? So just to go ahead and talk a little bit more about what happens here. So basically we want to have our effect when they scroll top here, plus the half of the window is more than the offset top of each of the sections, right? So for example, right now it's almost exactly the same. The moment it passes that, we want the effect to happen. Now what we want to do then is basically set the Y position of the background position, right? The Y, the amount that we go change the background position on the Y axis, right? And for that value, we want to convert the scroll top that we have when it's within the range of the image from here to here, which we represent with old min and old max. We want to sort of map it to a very small range, so 0 to minus 50, to kind of set it for that value. So now you can see that we have this pretty cool, scrolling effect that happens in this page. So another example of this, if I go to youtube.com/frontendtips, which is our channel, uh, let it load. So the other cool effect is here. We have some sort of a parallax here. So I'm just going to stop this. So now if I start scrolling, you can see that what happens is that, boom, there you go. We have this kind of effect, parallax effect. And now that we know how to generate something like this, Let's go back here. So right now what happens is that it actually sets these from 0 to -50, so it tries to go up, as you can see here. But now let's set it to 50. Now let's see what would be the effect. So if I now scroll down, you will see that we have some sort of effect like the one that YouTube has. So let's make it even bigger. So let's map it to a higher range from 0 to 100. Now you will see that they pretty much have the YouTube sort of effect. Right now you see the animation is a little bit jaggy. Don't bother. I have a lot of applications running on my computer. Uh, Otherwise it's going to be pretty smooth. Don't worry about that. So as you can see now, for this one, you'll see that it kind of has this cool parallax effect, which represents this sort of parallax that we have over here. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I know this tutorial was one of those tough tutorials. You need to kind of know the math. So go ahead and search, for example, in Google, how to, convert and map one range to another, and you're going to get this formula. So basically what we do is that we have our old range, which represented by old min and old max, and new range by new min and new max. And then we have a old value which will be within this range. And then we use this formula to convert the old value to a new value which will be within the new range, which is from 0 to 100, right? And then we set the background position on the y-axis. We're going to set the background position, which will give us this pretty cool effect. So I would like to ask you guys to go ahead and create prototypes either here in our online editor or anywhere else. Try to practice this, and I really want you to send me uh, your works based on this. I want you to go ahead and create this parallax effect and send it to me. You can use the email address kothus@kothus.com and send me. I want to see what have you guys done, and if please try to be creative as possible. Create all sort of things, and if you do that, I'm gonna promise that I'm gonna showcase your work in a tutorial, in a video, and I'm going to talk about a little bit how you can make them better and how you can make them performant. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please again, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. If you have any concerns or questions, please go ahead and put it in the comment section, and I wish you a great day and night. See you next time.